90 minutes past the hour, we're hearing reports that Myanmar's military has fired more airstrikes into a region controlled by the ethnic Karen minority. Now, the armed Karen National Union says that happened near the Thai border on Sunday. Reuters reports that around 3,000 villagers fled to Thailand on Sunday to escape the first round of airstrikes. All of this comes after the bloodiest weekend of military violence we've seen since the coup last month. Security forces reportedly killed at least 114 people on Saturday, including several children. Activists call it a day of shame. Simon Adams is the Executive Director of the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect and joins me now from New York. Simon, hi. Great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us. We've been watching these sort of thousands of people trying to leave now, in addition to this escalating violence. What does that tell you about the situation inside Myanmar?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Robin. And yeah, I mean, this was the bloodiest weekend that we've had yet in Myanmar. On Friday, you had the military openly threatening on national TV that they were going to shoot people at protests. Nevertheless, on the weekend, some of the largest protests we've seen in more than 40 cities and towns across Myanmar. The military responded by shooting dead 114 people, including 4 children. But I think what we should take away from this is the depth of popular opposition to military rule, even though the military keeps killing people day after day. And I think internationally, pressure is building on the regime as well, with criticism today from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and from other people around the world. So I'm not surprised that people are fleeing, but I think now is the time the international community needs to increase the pressure.
I mean, there has been some criticism that much of this has been sort of hollow criticism, and that really it's not doing anything. It's certainly falling on deaf ears. The junta doesn't appear to be listening to these concerns about the security situation in there. When we talk about the international community, is it more about what China does next, or Russia even?
Right. I mean, I've said the whole way through that statements of concern are not going to cut it in this situation. No. This is a very serious military regime, basically waging war against its own people, and it's going to take more than eloquent press statements to really turn that situation around. And I think, the things that are kind of missing at the moment are, what is ASEAN, the major regional organization, doing? It could do a lot more. What is India doing, a country that borders, of course, Myanmar as a regional superpower? And you mentioned the other big question mark in this situation, which is the Chinese. Up until this point, the Chinese have been the main guarantor of the generals in Myanmar, protecting them at the UN Security Council and so forth. But I think they have a unique opportunity to kind of play a potentially positive role in trying to get the military to step back from the current situation, because even from the kind of Chinese point of view, none of this is good for business. None of this adds up to peace and prosperity on their borders.
When we look at the momentum, the desperate violent momentum we've seen over this weekend, how concerned are you about ethnic militias now potentially getting involved, helping protesters? Does that increase the opportunities for this to become more violent, and also then conversely giving the military a reason to point fingers and come down harder?
Well, I don't think the military need any excuses to do that. I mean, they, of course, committed a genocide against the Rohingya population just a few years ago. They didn't like the results of last year's election, so they've just decided to, shoot down people in the streets and to take back power themselves. But certainly I'm not surprised that in some of these outlying regions where we've seen years, decades of ethnic conflict, it's not surprising that some of these groups have said, well, all bets are off. We were negotiating for a better future with a civilian-led government. Now that it's back to just straight-out military rule, there's no restraint on us fighting to defend our people.
How terrifying must it be? And it's difficult getting ordinary people to talk because of the fear and because of the access and the comms there. But children are being shot in their homes. People are being razed. Ordinary people. These aren't professional protesters. There is a depth to this protest movement across ages, across classes, across professions that is quite impressive, isn't it?
It's extraordinary, and it's incredibly inspiring, when you see the very inventive ways that people are continuing to defy the military, the way in which people are joining up with one another, things that were unimaginable a few years ago, like mainstream mass kind of support for the Rohingya, who people ignored even just a couple of years ago. All of that is happening, and people are still communicating with the outside world. I got to tell you, Robin, every day I wake up, I get emails, I get text messages, I get contacted in other sorts of ways by people inside Myanmar who are desperate, who are terrified, but who are still going out into the streets every day to protest against this military regime.
Simon Adams, thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching CNN. Still to come, desperate escape attempts in Mozambique as people scramble to get away from a days-long attack. We'll bring you the latest, what we know. That's next.